Senator Lee.
Thanks so much for being here, Mr. Vought, and for your willingness to serve. The administrative state has been crushing the American economy and American innovation. It's also something that operates in a manner that's fundamentally contrary to the structure and intent of the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Sections 1 and 7 make clear that only Congress may enact federal law. In Article 1, Section 7 in particular, it makes clear that you cannot make a federal law unless you follow the formula. And the formula involves bicameral passage of a single bill, a single item, a legislative text, in both houses, followed by submission to the president for signature, veto, or acquiescence. Unless you follow that model, you cannot, under the Constitution, make a federal law. For the last 80 or 90 years, Congress has been veering off course in that direction, and tragically, the courts have been at least inconsistent, or you might say largely absent, in enforcing these restrictions. Nonetheless, it's important that we arrest the problem, because the problem is arresting Americans, in some cases very literally, and not just metaphorically. It's estimated that in 2024 alone, executive branch bureaucrats in the Biden administration promulgated federal regulations that added $1.5 trillion in regulatory compliance costs just during that narrow time period. This on top of previous estimates suggesting as far back as 2016, 2017, that existing regulatory compliance costs imposed by federal regulators in Washington were somewhere in the range of around $2 trillion. So it's much higher than that now. These laws, written by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, they can't really be fired by anyone. They certainly don't ever have to stand for election. They're not known to the American people. And they promulgate nearly 100,000 pages of law, federal law, or initial drafts that could become law every single year. A simple solution to that would involve passage of a bill called the REINS Act. The REINS Act stands for Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny, would require that all federal regulations, before they may be enforced as federal law, if they qualify as major rules imposing affirmative legal obligations on the public, would have to be subjected to the bicameralism and presentment standard imposed by Article 1, Section 7. Mr. Vought, what are your views on the REINS Act, and will you and the Trump administration work with Congress to enact reforms like these?
Thank you, Senator. It's obviously an important area for the president of ensuring that the bureaucracies can't promulgate regulations that are harming the economy, harming the American people, and it's one of those creative ideas that I think Congress should take a strong look at. And the administration certainly supports the thrust of the direction of the legislation.
Now, there are those who argue that a significant amount of reform to federal regulations and to the process itself could be carried out through the executive branch itself acting alone. What are your views on that, and whether that would or could adequately do the job? Isn't there a risk there that if it's performed only by the executive branch, that might bring relief to Americans as long as this president is in office, but subject us to the same risk immediately after he leaves?
That would be the problem, and we saw that with regard to some of the proposals regarding administrative pay-go. When you give the administration or whoever the OMB director is the ability to execute this outside of statute, then you've got a situation where you can minimize costs and maximize benefits and potentially escape the process that Congress has intended.
I've recently reintroduced a bill in this Congress that I introduced last year. It's a bill called the America First Act. The America First Act imposes a simple principle on American law, a simple principle that most Americans agree with, which is that welfare benefits provided by the federal government should be available to Americans and not to those who are not Americans, especially those who are here unlawfully. It would ensure specifically that only U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents could be eligible to receive benefits under programs like Medicaid, SNAP, housing, education, some tax benefit programs, and a handful of other government benefits. these are things that impose significant costs on the American economy. They're draining resources meant to benefit Americans and not those who have come here, contrary to our laws, in order to receive them. Mr. Vought, would you commit to working with Congress to bring about reforms like these?
Absolutely, Senator. That's exactly the types of reforms that the president ran on.
Great. I see my time's expired. Thank you, Mayor, very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Have one more. You okay?
Yeah.
Senator Wyden.